Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Get ourselves some snacks.
Oak Tree Island is flourishing with creatures that haven't been seen for 160 million years. The dinosaurs, populating every continent of our world. South America is home to one of the earliest carnivores, Herrerasaurus. Asia was a popular hangout for the swift and cunning Velociraptor. The islands of Europe are home to Iguanodon and other small dinosaurs. Africa gave rise to the sailback Spinosaurus. Antarctica became a favorite vacation destination for Cryolophosaurus. The lost world down under of Australia was host to Minmi. The dinosaur melting pot of North America was under the dominion of Tyrannosaurus rex. As for me on the mainland, well, I have a big day ahead of me when I move into Oak Tree Farm in Conway, but I'm not the future resident on the roster. I've been accompanied by Melissa Goldfine, the Broadway enthusiast, Summer Bowerly, former mermaid performer at Ripley's Aquarium, and Trey Waters, one of SOS's resident class clowns. We were jamming out and making merry at the Sertoma Ball. Little did I know that I was about to increase revenue for Oak Tree Island, but this time on the mainland. Seems fitting because 5 years ago, the dinosaurs from Isla Nublar have escaped the manor of Benjamin Lockwood. While the facilities, amenities, and enclosures were being under construction, the very first dinosaurs started to arrive. The first arrival was a herd of Nasutoceratops.
Do you see any resemblance between the Nasutoceratops and modern-day cattle? Look closely at the horns and their relation to the eyes. It's clear to me that as we bring these animals back to life, the connections between the past and the present sharpen, and along with it, our understanding. This is what my science is all about.
The herd eventually is settling into their new enclosure. Beachgoers seeing dinosaurs for the first time was not only a customer satisfaction, but also to increase revenue. The ratings were a work in progress, but now it was time to introduce some carnivores. The first comers of the predatory line was a pack of Dilophosaurus.
This dinosaur, the Dilophosaurus, has a distinctive neck frill it can expand when it senses danger. It's also been known to spit into the eyes of its prey, blinding it before it goes in for the kill.
This is no ordinary predator. Its jaws are specialized to absorb the stress of struggling prey. Like its forerunners in the late Triassic, its specialized hips and ankles enable it to move quickly. Our third edition screams, "Enter the Dragon." This is where a herd of Dracorex started flying in.
Now this dinosaur, the Dracorex, is something strange. Its name means the Dragon King of a fictional school for wizards. I think I could have come up with that myself. The name, not the dinosaur. For that, we need the scientists.
Seemed appropriate because there were some countries that dinosaurs were mistaken for dragons. Despite their intimidating appearance, they're actually herbivorous and more related to Pachycephalosaurus. While the harem settles into their new home, it was time to introduce some sauropods, but this time, one from North America. It's two Apatosaurus.
This massive specimen is called the Apatosaurus. An impressive animal that can intimidate even the most determined of predators. The Apatosaurus's evolutionary advantages are its size and its demeanor.
Oak Tree Island is planning to get a whole herd of them. But for now, we're starting with 2. At least there's enough vegetation to support their monstrous appetites. While the 2 Apatosaurus settle in, a pack of Deinonychus were flown in.
Claire Deering. She's gone from manager to advocate. She's a survivor. A result of her interactions with the dinosaurs and her headstrong nature.
This dinosaur is important for a number of reasons. I mean, they're all important, but this one, the Deinonychus, was the center of debate among paleontologists for many years. Specifically, were the dinosaurs cold-blooded or warm-blooded animals? With them alive and in the park, we have our answer.
Thanks to the Jurassic Park novels and movie adaptations, this is what many people thought of as a velociraptor. Like their Canadian cousin Atrociraptor, these dromaeosaurids were also found in North America. While the pack was settling in, it was time for me to introduce another dromaeosaurid, but this time found in Europe, and it lived by its name, Olympic Fire Thief, aka Pyroraptor.
There's certainly something special about this one. Je ne sais quoi. It's a Pyroraptor. Had it not been for a forest fire sweeping through southern France, our little feathered friend here may have gone undiscovered. And my life insurance would be just that little bit cheaper.
These particular raptors were only recognized from a handful of bones, but they were actually reconstructed with similar bird-like features. The very few bones paleontologists have share some specialized features with other members of the Dromaeosaur family, like Velociraptor. Their leader is Diablo, and he seems to be settling in well with his new enclosure. This is one of the females who was Diablo's second in command, Blaze. And over here is Ember. She's strong and aggressive. Even our keepers at Oak Tree Island are wise enough not to get on her bad side. And this is Cinder. She's equally coordinated as Ember, but except less violent. And an amazing speed demon. And just displayed an incredible record, killing her prey in 4 seconds. Dig that. And rounding out the pack is Quickfire. He's a loose cannon with a short fuse and will be willing to scrap with anybody or anything. He's fearless. Oh, who am I kidding? He's wily. Regarding the dysfunction, Diablo will make sure he keeps the pack in line. The day has just begun, and the beach facility has 2 stars. But I'm including more dinosaurs, like this herd of Edmontosaurus. Luckily, they're settling into their new enclosure. Unlike Apatosaurus, who relied on stones and chemicals to help process their food, Edmontosaurus has a more direct method. The front of their muzzles are toothless and rigid for shearing plants. When chewing, a battery of hundreds of tightly packed teeth help grind the vegetation to a pulp. Days have passed, and I was on a group outing at River City Cafe with former intern Siobhan Roberts. Even Taylor Davis Bryan is enjoying herself.
Is it cold enough for you?
After lunch, we walked around the beach. When the dinosaurs disappeared, so too did the gigantic marine reptiles that once terrorized the oceans. There was no predator bigger than a whale to eat the sharks.
Well, Siobhan, I gotta say, you are a real beauty at the beach.
As much as I found Siobhan beautiful, it was time for me to introduce some of the sea's long-lost monsters. In one of the lagoon exhibits, I was able to make a request for a pot of Plesiosaurus.
Another creature from the ancient oceans. This time a Plesiosaurus. It has a flat body, an elongated tail, and 4 powerful flippers that help it glide through the water. Like modern-day sea mammals, it has to come up for air. It basically spends its time surfing and eating, which is not a bad way to live.
On land, they are cumbersome hawks, but in the water, they are transformed. This is Charisma Rodriguez. She is one of SOS's newest staff members. She later on became my boss for Bean Dreaming. For now, she's joining us in a game of charades at the Kiwanis Club.
What do you get when you cross her with a mermaid and an octopus? Sushi is sushi that delivers herself.
After telling that joke to Charisma, it gave me some inspiration to include another species of marine reptile. It's a pod of Ichthyosaurus.
While dinosaurs once ruled the earth, other animals ruled the seas. Take the Ichthyosaurus, a perfect example of what I'm talking about. They have a large dorsal fin, much like a dolphin. Or actually more like a shark.
These are the oldest of marine reptiles. With streamlined fish-like bodies, they are the most extremely adaptive to aquatic life. A week later, and my group went to Alligator Adventure. I started looking at their large birds like this cassowary and ostriches. Inspired by their striding walk, I filled in a request for a flock of Gallimimus. And don't tell me you see a connection. The flock was assigned to the Nasutoceratops enclosure. Luckily they were easygoing because they seemed to be fairly harmless roommates. With a lack of a tail, ostriches and other birds don't provide a completely accurate model. Luckily, I pursued a more distant cousin, the alligators and crocodiles. By looking at that one crocodile devouring some raw chicken, it was time for me to include dinosaurs in one of the inland enclosures, and I knew just the appropriate candidate. Baryonyx.
Okay, this is amazing. A baryonyx. These animals have very large claws on their first digit. This dinosaur also likes water, so take a moment to consider its needs when planning out a suitable habitat for it. The baryonyx was originally thought to be a scavenger, but now, with live animals to study, we can find out for sure.
Baryonyx may look like a crocodile, but it also fishes like a bear. When they got to their enclosure, they were half-starved, but luckily they were making up for it now. Oak Tree Farm requested more large carnivores. The latest arrival is a cousin of T-Rex called Albertosaurus.
This is the Albertosaurus, so named because it was first discovered in the Canadian province of Alberta. This animal is a smart predator that relies on its rows of sharp teeth. They exhibit pack behavior, which is very exciting to witness, as long as you're doing so from a safe distance.
Albertosaurus may look like a T-Rex, but when it comes to speed, this is where the similarities end. If T-Rex was the speed equivalent of a Mack truck or SUV, then Albertosaurus is the speed equivalent of a Formula One race car. The way that those alligators crawled around their pond, it was time to include another new arrival, though it wasn't a dinosaur, but a synapsid. It's called Dimetrodon.
I finally get it. I finally understand why people have a fear of the dark. Once you peer into the shadows and see a pair of Dimetrodon eyes staring back at you, well, you'll be having nightmares for years. That's if you're lucky enough to walk away, because believe me, not everybody is.
It might have been obvious that they are related to dinosaurs, but they're not. They have specialized anatomical features that are more linked to mammals and humans. As a mammal-like reptile, they have specialized teeth. Incisors shear off chunks of flesh. Serrated canines cut and slice. We humans inherit a small version of these meat-eating teeth in our mouths today. While lions today consume 70% of a carcass, Dimetrodon eat 90%. I was at Broadway at the beach, well, specifically Dino Park. Before I went to Rec, I decided what to include next. I decided to include more dinosaurs from the Jurassic period. The latest arrivals are a herd of Stegosaurus. They may be herbivores, but they're extremely dangerous. The large plates on their backs are primarily there for display, though it's the meter-long spikes on their tails known as a thagomizer, which make it so lethal. These they could wield with devastating effect despite having a very small brain for their body size. The Dracorex harem have now been relocated to the Nasutoceratops enclosure for the benefit of the Stegosaurus. But 3 Allosaurus have also been incubated, and Oak Tree Farm has an enclosure reserved for them. Like the Baryonyx, they too were half-starved. Luckily, it was feeding time. These are the lions of the Jurassic, the top predators of their age. The beach exhibits are nearly done in Site B, so the board decided to wrap things up before resuming the inland exhibits. This Pachyrhinosaurus animatronic inspired the board to have a herd of their own. The herd has been assigned to the Edmontosaurus enclosure. Seems appropriate because during their time, these Arctic dinosaurs migrate to escape the bitter cold. Here, it's not going to be an issue because there's enough water and vegetation for everyone. After rec, I decided to go back to Broadway at the beach, starting with Ripley's Aquarium. I decided to include marine reptiles that would eat sharks for breakfast, starting with this pod of Liopleurodon.
It is the diversity of life we are discovering that I find to be most interesting. Take this animal, the Liopleurodon, for instance. This is a carnivorous marine reptile that is optimized for efficiency, both for swimming effortlessly through the water and for relentlessly hunting its prey. And what nature created, we can recreate. And maybe, if I can be so bold, improve upon. Or at least find ways to exploit.
At 150 tons, these are the largest carnivores to ever surge through the waters during their time. Liopleurodon has a directional sense of smell. 2 separate chambers in their noses work in the same way as a pair of ears, pinpointing where their meal is coming from. After checking out the shark tank, I decided to look at the iguana tank. Judging by Gideon Mantell's stellar discovery of the iguanodon near his quarry in Sussex, I decided to make a request for a herd in the inlet section of the beach premises. By checking out the bearded dragon, it made me think of another armored herbivore, Polacanthus, and some were assigned to the iguanodon enclosure.
This is the Polacanthus, and it's covered in armor plates and spikes. Mess with this animal at your own risk.
These armored herbivores were often found in iguanodon herds, and there is safety in numbers. After checking out the lizards, I decided to pay Summer a visit. I told her about the marine reptiles that were put on exhibit. I decided to surprise her because the beach section has room for one more marine reptile. The Oak Tree Island board confirmed it was a Mosasaurus.
So when people come to the park, they want to learn something, sure, but they also want to be entertained. And this marine reptile, the Mosasaurus, is just that, a showstopper. If the T-Rex is the ruler of the dinosaurs on land, then the Mosasaurus holds that title below the waves. Make sure this animal is a premium attraction.
By breaching at that shark, I decided to call her Scylla, named after the Hydra that attacked Odysseus and his men on their way to Ithaca. To my very eyes, Summer found that name fitting. Marine reptiles were one of the glories of the Jurassic, even though turtles are the only ones left, but there was another species of reptile that shared the same time as the dinosaurs. Pterosaurs. An aviary was built, and the first arrivals is a small species called Dimorphodon.
You'd think a mouthful of teeth would be scary enough, but this animal, the Dimorphodon, actually has 2 distinct types of teeth in its jaws. And it flies. Well, more accurately, glides.
It was a start, but more pterosaurs were flying in. But this time, much bigger. This time, it's a flock of pteranodons.
The more I've studied these animals, the more I've noticed that there's a fine line between fascination and fear. Prehistoric flying reptiles like the archetypal Pteranodon have captivated my imagination since I was young. Yet there's something about these creatures that makes me feel somewhat cagey, shall we say?
If T-Rex was the apex predator on land and Mosasaurus of the sea, it was time to include an apex predator of the skies. And the Oak Tree board read my mind. The candidate was Quetzalcoatlus.
They say everything is bigger in Texas, and that certainly applies to their fossil finds. This towering pterosaur is definitely one for the record books. We're talking about one of the largest flying animals, like, ever. It's not a bird, and it's not a plane. It's a Quetzalcoatlus.
Named after an Aztec god, and with a wingspan as big as a World War II fighter plane, it is the undisputed king of the skies. I've gone back to Dino Park. The board suggested to me if I should include Triceratops and Velociraptor in the inland section of Site B. Eventually, I made my decision. A pack of Velociraptors started flying in. Some members of the pack had some dysfunction issues. It didn't last very long, and calm is restored. While the pack cools off, a herd of Triceratops started coming in. Little do we know that we were in for another shock. The board was in for another fight. Despite the violence, it was a noteworthy sight worth watching. For the injured male, this has been one fight too many. Though the goal wasn't to kill, it's to intimidate. The board wanted me to include a species of sauropod, so I thought outside the box, something familiar and huge. This is Brachiosaurus, a 13-meter high sauropod that specializes in browsing on the treetops.
Okay, what we have here is a Brachiosaurus. It has long limbs relative to the rest of its body, and what makes it really unique is that it's a warm-blooded dinosaur. I mean, how amazing is it that in bringing these dinosaurs back, we're also learning so much about them?
Their kind can effortlessly harvest cones and fresh leaves no other dinosaur can reach. I decided to include one more armored herbivore in the inland section of the park, and I knew the appropriate candidate, the extraordinary Ankylosaurus. By coincidence, two have arrived.
They call this the Ankylosaurus. I call it an armored ball of walking, breathing trouble. Still, some might call it charming, amusing, delightful. Each to their own.
They are evolved to withstand attack even from large predators like T-Rex. Overhauled with 7 tons of bone and armored muscle, Ankylosaurus are so heavily armored, even their eyelids have armor. If that wasn't enough, they have a formidable club on the end of their tails. But sadly, none of these magnificent creatures had any defense against the natural forces that suffocated Isla Nublar. It was time for me to wrap up the last 2 enclosures in the inland section, and I thought it was time to include a T-Rex in that area. Surprisingly, it was settling into its new enclosure. Results in this popularity contest may vary, but the newest residents have already arrived. To increase customer satisfaction, I already figured out what super predator should be in the last enclosure. Like Spinosaurus, it surpassed the T-Rex's height. There was not one, but two Giganotosaurus.
Delivery has been completed.
This is Owen Grady. He's an animal behaviorist that specializes in training velociraptors. Which means that he's a little... what's the word I'm looking for? Determined? I say that with all respect, of course.
People often confuse this animal, the Giganotosaurus, with the T-Rex. They look similar, act similar, and both have that eat everything within their field of vision thing working for them. This dinosaur is also fast. Bottom line, if you find yourself running from this biggie, you've already made a fatal mistake.
Comparing a T-Rex with a Giganotosaurus is like comparing a lion with a tiger, because like them, the size difference between the two are slight.
It is absolutely imperative that SOS supports the conservation of the dinosaurs. Sometimes these creatures require our absence. If we could just step aside, trust in nature, life will find a way.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Get ourselves some snacks.